Wardour Street English. Wardour Street English, sometimes simply Wardour Street, refers to a pseudo-archaic form of diction affected by some writers, particularly those of historical fiction. The allusion is to Wardour Street's former reputation as a center for dealers in antique and reproduction furniture and the supposed propensity of their kind for passing off modern imitations as the genuine article. Well-made play. The well-made play is a dramatic genre from 19th-century theatre first codified by French dramatist Eugene Scribe. Dramatists Victorien Sardou, Alexandre Dumas-Fils, and Émile Augier wrote within the genre, each putting a distinct spin on the style. The well-made play was a popular form of entertainment. By the mid-19th century, however, it had already entered into common use as a derogatory term. Henrik Ibsen and the other realistic dramatists of the later 19th century, August Strindberg, Gerhard Hauptmann, Émile Zola, Anton Chekhov, built upon its technique of careful construction and preparation of effects in the genre problem play. Through their example, Marvin Carlson explains, the well-made play became, and still remains, the traditional model of play construction. In the English language, that tradition found its early 20th century codification in Britain in the form of William Archer's Play-Making, a Manual of Craftsmanship, 1912, and in the United States with George Pierce Baker's Dramatic Technique, 1919. Wellerisms. Wellerisms, named after sayings of Sam Weller in Charles Dickens' novel The Pickwick Papers, make fun of established clichés and proverbs by showing that they are wrong in certain situations, often when taken literally. In this sense, Wellerisms that include proverbs are a type of anti-proverb. Typically, a Wellerism consists of three parts: a proverb or saying, a speaker, and an often humorously literal explanation. Western fiction. Western fiction is a genre of literature set in the American Old West frontier and typically set from the late 18th to the late 19th century. Well-known writers of Western fiction include Zane Grey from the early 20th century and Louis L'Amour from the mid-20th century. The genre peaked around the early 1960s, largely due to the popularity of televised westerns such as Bonanza. Readership began to drop off in the mid to late 1970s and reached a new low in the 2000s. Most bookstores, outside a few West American states, only carry a small number of Western fiction books. Writerly and readerly texts. Translations of the French neologisms scriptable and listenable verse employed by Roland Barthes. For Barthes, the readerly or listenable text is the most conventional literary work, realist in nature, and one which hides the signs of its being a work of fiction or literary production. It is a fixed product, conforming to the dominant cultural modes of literature during the time of its production. Barthes sees such a text as making the reader passive in his or her reception of it, leaving the reader only the choice of either accepting or rejecting it, and its ideologically mystified perspective on the world. The writerly or scriptable text, on the other hand, draws attention to its own artifice, to the ways in which it is structured, to its intertextuality and its self-reflexivity or self-consciousness, for example, and so challenges the reader to engage actively in the interpretation of such a text. Writing. Though a familiar enough term indicative of the inscribed marks representing speech, Jacques Derrida explores and expands the term in ways which destabilize the conventional notion of writing as a more or less unproblematic mode of communication, or otherwise as the idea of the graphic approximation of speech. In the essay Signature Event Context, Derrida schematizes how what he calls the classical concept of writing is usually understood. 1. As a mark which can be reiterated, the function of which is not exhausted in any single inscription. Such a mark, whether in the form of a statement, a signature or proper name, or, indeed, a literary text such as a novel, is, in principle, communicable as a writing in that it can communicate beyond and, indeed, before, without, the presence of any living subject, such as the author. 2. At the same time, what we call writing may be cited outside its immediate context, and its meaning therefore transformed, again beyond the control of any author or the notion of authorial intent. Derrida points out that, because the written sign, writing, is iterable and can be extracted from any context, its function or meaning cannot be contained by, or reduced to, any finite context. 3. The break with what we call context indicates for Derrida the spacing of which any writing partakes in the first place, in order to be meaningful. A written sign, in order to be meaningful, has to function not only through its immediate presence, but, importantly, in its spatial difference from other signs. The spacing by which meaning emerges and is in fact possible at all is not a simple blank space or negative for Derrida, but is, instead, that which makes the mark or inscription possible. And pursuing these aspects of writing by giving attention initially to the written sign, narrowly conceived as the written or printed words on a page, Derrida demonstrates how all language, including spoken language and images, is in fact a writing, available only through spacing, through difference, and more significantly, difference. Thus not only is there no immediacy or plenitude in any sign, but writing, far from being the secondary, debased supplement to the spoken word and to the idea of language in general, and with that the promise of presence for which the vocable apparently acts as guarantor, is, in fact, that which makes any communication possible, even while, as writing, all signs can only refer to other signs, without ever attaining semantic or syntagmatic stability.